The credit market may finally be waking up to the equity market's decline, and if history is any guide, that's a bad sign for stocks. It could even lead to the S&P 500 being repriced to significantly lower valuations. You will know why at the end of the show. Rising credit spreads signal that investors are adjusting risk, which is typically accompanied by valuation contracting. The inverse of the PE ratio is the earnings yield, and historically, the earnings yield of the S&P 500 trades with credit spreads. Credit spreads are currently incredibly low, which is why stock market valuations are high. If recession risk is real, then credit spreads should not only rise, but will rise much further than the current levels. In October 2023, the SDX 5-year yield credit spread index traded around 550 basis points. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 had an earnings yield of 5.7%. This is compared to the current credit spread of 346 basis points and the S&P 500 earnings yield of 4.6%. It may not sound like a big difference for the S&P 500 earnings yield, but that is equivalent to the PE ratio of 21.7 going to 17.5. It would amount to the S&P 500 declining by another 20% from its current level. If uncertainty and recession are the drivers here, then the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index would seem to suggest that the credit spreads and the earnings yield have much further to climb. The uncertainty index has only been higher during the pandemic over the past 20 years. Given this, it would seem to suggest that credit spreads are too tight and would need to rise significantly from current levels if this type of uncertainty continues. At least at present, the key levels to watch in the S&P 500 are 5,600. Once that level of support breaks, there is minimal standing in the way of the index falling to 5,400. After 5,400, the next support level comes at August low of around 5,100. But a drop to 5,400 won't be enough. Valuations would still be pretty high at 20. If credit spreads continue to rise and the valuations fall to a 17.5 PE ratio, 4,400 to 4,600 could be the final destination.